Welcome all to the Legends of Runeterra,
fan-made card set.
where I've taken all of the cards from different factions and League of Legends themes and thematics and put them into the card game for more diverse styles of play. So without further ado, let's get into it. What we have here is the card Fading Memory, and it's starting off with all the Noxus cards. And what Fading Memory does is that it's ephemeral, and it's very good since it wants to die. It sets up mill decks, and decks that shuffle a lot.
The card Rolling Papers is really good for powering up an ally this round, but it really stuns them and weakens them next round, so you have to make the best use of it. So here's the Rune Electrocute, and I made it a card. And it's a really good burst card, it's unavoidable, and it's strong for when you already do a lot of damage, so it's really good for aggro decks. Here's the Epic Noxus card. He's called the Orb Counter, and he has lifesteal, and it's really rewarded for keeping alive as long as possible because he gets a barrier and when he attacks, so you want to keep on attacking with him so you can keep on topping off your Nexus. Now here's Demacia, and we will start off with the Epic Demacia card, the Magic Hater. And it really punishes you for using magic. I try to keep a thematic to Demacia, so he's really strong early, so it's really banking on drawing this card early, but it punishes you for using spells, so it's best to get this card out really early.
Speak to the Manager is really good because it's a supporting card that can just power up your allies.
After that is the card Left Leg of the Forbidden One, and it's based off of the Exodia card. I thought it's really cool to have that kind of card in the video card game. So when you hit their Nexus, you summon an exact copy of this card, and that's how you try to summon it in this game. The card Forbidden Assembly is the polymerization of all the left legs of the Forbidden One, and when you have the fourth one on your field, you play it, and then you can summon the left-legged Anomaly. Here's a card, Left-Legged Anomaly, and it's just like a game winner that rewards you for playing and combining all the left legs. Here's a card, Quinn's Other Bird, and this card is really good for messing up spell decks. So what you do is you want to throw basically your spell into their deck to throw off the flow of their tempo. And it pretty much excels at that. And for our final Demacian card, we have the Quick Herder. That's elusive, but also ephemeral. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and you have to really capitalize on its good players. You have to capitalize on this card's strengths and avoid its weaknesses. The Freljord cards. This first Freljord card is the Frozen Bride, and she's really strong at supporting allies. So you want to put her out when you have an ally on the field, and when that ally hits someone, they frostbite an enemy. So it's really strong as a support card. So here we have the card Burr, and what Burr does is it frostbites all enemies. But that's for the first turn, and the next turn after that, it frostbites all allies. So you really have to make good use of this card quickly before you're punished for it. We have the card Battle Bridge, and basically this is a spell that makes an ARAM. So what you do is you recall all units from the field or the board, and then both of you just get 5 random minions, and you basically duke it out like that. So I think it's a pretty fun thematic card. Next up is the card Ice Bros. And Ice Bros is just really good at being a mid-tempo card that really rewards you for playing a Freljord deck and frostbiting enemies, allowing you to overwhelm the field very quickly. And the final Freljord card is Me and the Boys, and it's just a bunch of the Watcher Warriors, and it's one of those late game cards that is just really strong. And as you can see, it can choose who to attack, it's double attack, and it's overwhelming. So it's really good at closing out games or creating high amounts of pressure on the board. Moving on, we have the Bilgewater cards. And we start with Mimic, which is basically like a Mimic, but the spin on this one is you have to capture an ally, you gain their stats, and when this one dies, and it spits out the ally that you captured. And after that, we have Pogfish. And it's a pretty good card with regeneration. But the problem is you need to buff it in order to regenerate, since it only has 1 health that it can't block. So you really gotta be careful with this card. Bonzo the Blast Prone. And Bonzo is basically capitalizing on the plunder keyword. And when you plunder someone, you get Bonzo's Great Escape, which is the next card I'll show you. Ta-da! Here's Bonzo's Great Escape. And you recall Bonzo from your hand, and when you do, you obliterate all units on the field. So it's really thematic, like a pirate ship blowing up. Kaboom! Moving on, we have the card One Last Hostage. Pretty straightforward. The guy has a hostage, so he has a barrier. A pretty unique card for certain decks is the Water Spout. And what the Water Spout does is it's a defensive utility card that if an enemy strikes it, it makes it get recalled. So it's really good for bouncing cards back into the enemy's hand. Finally, we have the biggest Bilgewater card in the set, the Pogger's Fish. And basically it's a game-winning card, and when you get enlightened, you just become massive. So you have to be really careful to try to play the mana curve, get your mana as fast as possible, and then win. Afterwards, we have the Ionia part of the expansion. And we start with the Ionian card, Terrified Villagers, and basically they're a bunch of people that are scared shitless, and they're running around like headless chickens. So when they strike, they get recalled. And it's basically just a weak little card that's pretty good at setting up plays. Then we have the Overly Fast Ninja. I wanted to make a card that was really strong but had a really big drawback. And because he's overly fast, every time you strike, you have to discard one card. So you have to weigh in your mind whether you want to do big damage with the elusive 5 attack, or if you're doing that at the cost of discarding a card. And the Monkey of Excess. It's like one of those kind of Indiana Jones style treasures and stuff. And what it does is every card in your hand gives it an extra 1/1. But when you play cards, it loses that. So it's good to have if you have a lot of cards in your hand. So you can play it with like the Terrified Villagers, and they strike, and then that goes back to your hand, and then the Monkey of Excess attacks, and then it gets more stats. After the Monkey of Excess, we have the rare card, the Jutsu Master. And he's a pretty powerful card, and as you see, he's mastered a lot of jutsus like Barrier, Elusive, Lifesteal, Quick Attack, and Tough. But this is offset by his low stats for a 6 mana card. So you really gotta think about when you play him and how you play him to best take advantage of him. Here we have the Epic Ionia card, the spell Secret Scroll. And it's a slow card, so it's one of the slower spells that can be countered and stuff. But it's really strong because it makes you enlightened, so it instantly gives you 10 mana. So if you draw this on turn 6, or when you have enough mana to play it, this gets really good and powers you up fast. Ahead of the tempo curve. Finally, the last Ionian card is Forest Guardian. And when you get Allegiance for this card, you get way, way stronger. So you really want to make sure you have Ionian cards in your deck to go with Forest Guardian. Onto the Shadow Isles cards. And here we have the epic card, Sorb of the Wretched. And what this basically does, it's like a ghost train. It's ephemeral but elusive. And you can strike, and when you strike someone, you give them ephemeral. And when you do that, you then shuffle Sorb back into your deck. So it's like a train that's doomed to zoom eternally. The other only card that is the Shadow Isles in this expansion is also epic, and it's the Blighted Blart. And it's really strong because you're basically trying to blow it up against 2 other enemy cards, and you only have 1 turn to use this card because it's ephemeral, but it is double attack and challenger. So you're really just trying to go against 2 enemies with high power so you can really chunk the enemy nexus. So it's really strong like that. Forgotten Package, Corky forgot his package, so that's why it's fleeting. But when you support an ally, you give them +7 and +0. And you give them a quick attack for this round, so it makes them really, really strong. So you gotta use this really quickly because it's fleeting. This one is Piltovian Drain, and it's like a really drain type of card because it's lifesteal, and you summon, you drain one from a unit. So it's a really good card to get out early and kind of solidify an advantage or bolster your attack. Next up we have Wrong Target, which is all about Jinx's hijinks and her wacky adventures and stuff, but she hit the wrong target. So because of that, it also hurts your hand, so you have to discard your hand and toss 3, but she also aimed for the wrong building. But it was good, since it was the enemy nexus, and you deal 7 damage to it. And then, the man with no hair. And he's really a tactical card, because you have to discard the lowest cost card in your hand every round, but then your enemy discards the highest cost card. So it really banks on you having bad cards in your hand, your enemy having good cards in their hand. And he's tough, so he lasts on the field for quite a while. As I said, it's a really kind of tactical card for more advanced players. Here's a pretty cool spell. I call it Twice the Limbs, and you basically give someone a double attack. So it's pretty cool. Just they attack twice now. And then we have Wrong Blueprints, and this is a pretty wacky card. It's the Epic Piltover card, or Zon card, and it's the Wrong Blueprints, so that's why both players have to switch all their remaining spells in their decks. So it's pretty crazy, like topsy-turvy gameplay. It's really good for turning the tides, or use this against enemies who have a spell-focused deck and you want to really throw a wrench in their plans. Or if you have bad cards and spells in your deck, then they go into the enemy deck. But it's also like, if you don't have any spells, but your enemy has a lot of spells and you already used all of your spells, you basically take their cards. So they're going to run out of cards faster, and then you win. Afterwards, we have Not So Magic Mike, and he's really good except when people cast spells. So you need to make sure not to cast spells and that your opponent doesn't cast spells either. So it's good to play with Wrong Blueprints if you can limit the amount of spells being cast. Or it's good with the Massey Index where you're trying not to cast spells, like with a Magic Hater. But this dude is really strong stats, but as long as spells get played, his stats go lower and lower. For the final zone card, we have VIP Treatment, and to play it, you basically have to use it to kill an enemy champion, and then it stuns all enemy units, so it's really good at just sniping the enemy champion. Finally, we have the Void cards, and this is Void Tube Slide, and it's basically a really kind of crazy card that's focused on obliterating stuff and messing up the battlefield. And at the start of your round, you recall an ally, and they go back. It's like they go back to the void. And then you summon a random ally from your deck, so it's kind of crazy with the RNG. So it's like really mixes up card, and then finally obliterate the top card of your deck. So it's good for obliterating if your deck focuses on obliterate. So here's the card your biggest fans, and basically, whenever an enemy unit is summoned, you summon an exact copy of this card. So it's really good for anti-Zoo decks, because then you get a Zoo deck as well, and you can always match them. The thing is that it has low stats, but if you buff it, then it gets summoned with the exact better stats, so it's good to buff this card. Then we have the card Who Sacrifices It Anyway, and to play you have to obliterate an ally, and when you do that, you can toss 5 and obliterate the top 5 cards of the enemy deck. So it's really, really strong for obliterating 5 cards off the enemy deck and then tossing some cards as well. So you really want to use this card when you have an ally you want to obliterate. Here is Bone Snapper Susie, who is basically a 6 cost card, but to play her you need to obliterate an ally and enemy, so it's kind of even-handed, and she's snapping a lot of bones when she gets summoned. And she's 6/6, pretty standard stats for a card of this cost. Here's a really strong card, You Ambassador. It's fearsome, but the thing is you have to obliterate an allied follower from the void. So you need to have already a void creature on your board, a minion on your board, in order to obliterate them. And then this guy's the new ambassador, so he comes out instead, and he's really strong, but he's kind of limited because you already need to have a void character on your field. Finally, the last card of the voids, and this makes it the last card of the whole expansion, is Hungry Voidborn, and it costs a lot, and it's pretty strong, but it costs 1 less for each unit that you've obliterated this game. So it's really good for pairing it with the previous cards in the set and all the other obliterate cards, because it makes this card really cheap. So you can kind of hold on to it in your hand with like the Monkey of Excess and then obliterate cards, keep on obliterating, and then boom. This can be like 3 mana at the end of the game, and you play it and then you can win. And there you have it. There's the rest of the cards for the expansion. Those are all of the cards. Thanks for watching. One of my biggest passions is to be a video game designer with cards, especially like I like playing Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! and stuff like that. So if you could share this on Reddit or Twitter, and Riot Games can see it, that'd be really cool. I'd love to make these cards a reality. Thanks for watching.